Yeah, but as we understand it, this new Cherry Creek Youth Facility, built with enormous fanfare, a brand new purpose-built facility that's supposed to be very secure for the guards, because there is an issue with violence against guards in youth justice settings. But also, it's meant to be purpose-built to create a much better environment with a lot of support services wrapped around it for the 15 to 18-year-old male offenders who would be put into the facility. It finished as we understand it. I think some reports it was finished months and months ago. I think the union's suggesting it was finished a little more recently than that. But one of the issues is that there aren't staff available to staff the facility, for want of a better word.
And there's been an advertising campaign, I think, putting the call out to staff to man the posts at the new prison. Let's find out more about it. Brad Batten, member of the Victorian Legislative Assembly. Brad, thanks for joining us. There's just no staff for a lot of things, prisons included. Good morning to you.
Hi to you, Nick. Good to speak to you. And I was worried where you're going with the hotel at the start. You are right. Look, staffing is an issue across the whole state, and we've known that for a long period of time. I think our argument here really is everybody is now acknowledging that Cherry Creek's been ready for a while, and they could have started advertising before to ensure they had staff available so they could use the facility as soon as it's operational. However, they didn't want to advertise before the election, because who wants to run an advertising program before November 26 to say that we've got a problem in our youth justice system? It didn't suit their narrative, and I think the consequences now are we're spending millions on keeping a facility closed.
But Brad, in all fairness, advertising the jobs wouldn't necessarily fix the problem, would it? If the staff isn't there, or there aren't enough people who want that sort of job around, no matter how much advertising you do, you're not going to get them.
That's correct, Nick, and that's why one of the things that we're really committed to is actually now looking at criminal justice reform and finding ways that we can keep young people out of the prison system. But if you're going to have a system sitting there empty, or a facility sitting there empty spending millions of dollars, that means it's less money spent on keeping young people out of prison. We need to start making young people work ready through programs. We can intervene earlier. We can use programs through Victoria Police or other organisations. At the end of the day, we've got to get rid of the focus of having every young person locked up for crime and start to look at the ones that we're afraid of. They're the violent ones. They need to be within the justice system. And the ones that we're mad at, we need to start putting in programs so we can rework with them and get them job ready for the future. If we do that, it's a safer community. They end up a better part within our community, and we end up with less people in the prison system anyway. We've got 3 youth detention centres now for a total of 120 people, they keep telling us on average.
But in fairness, though, once again, the 3 are age separated, and it's not a bad idea to have 15 to 18-year-olds separate to the 18 and above, because 15 to 18, you would hope you've still got a chance of genuine, if it's not too serious, genuine rehab, whereas 18, you're starting to really get serious, aren't you?
Yeah, that's correct. But again, I refer it back. You've got Malmesbury, which has got 18 to 21-year-olds on the dual track system. And credit to the government, it's probably one of the most successful programs in the world where people go into the youth justice system between age 18 and 21 and do not reoffend. But under 18, it's 1 in 2 come back within 12 months. So if that's working, why aren't we then reviewing on what's working in the 18 to 21-year-olds that we can replicate, because it's about making people job ready from 15 to 18. We know education's important. I left school early, but we know education's important. But at the same time, there is a segment of the society that's not going to go right through the education system, and they fall through the gaps, and there's a potential they end up committing crime. So why can't we work with them at an earlier stage? And at the end of the day, Nick, if I had my way, I'd have no kids in jail under the age of 18, because that means there's no crime. But the reality is that's not going to happen. So how do we now change the system? We've got 3 jails, so many beds. The new jail would house everyone. Now, yes, we have to have them separate. Then why don't we build smaller ones in different locations that only hold 6 or 8 people? There's so many different opportunities that other countries do that are very successful. Smaller prisons or smaller detention centres, we can call them homes and hubs, that make them job ready and community ready so they can learn about living, learn about life skills. Instead, we put them all in the one facility based on their age and their sex. So we're mixing violent offenders with non-violent offenders, and that's a negative outcome.
Brad, what's your understanding of when this facility was finished and handed over to government?
Yeah, the 2 reports we've had is June last year, and then one coming up close to the election. So And as you know, Heidi, depending who speaks to you on what message they want to give you. So it's somewhere in them, but we're pretty confident it was before the election. The government will still say it's not operational now, but we believe that's not the case.
So why is it not operational now?
Because they're not ready for it. I honestly believe, and I know Nick would argue around the advertising, you can put as many ads as you want out, but if the government knew it was going to be ready, if 3AW was going to expand and you were going to have a new studio, you would have it in your 5-year plan and start advertising 12 months out and get people in place. We do it with schools. There's principals appointed to a school 12 months before the school opens. Why wasn't there management appointed to Cherry Creek 12 months before it opened so they could do their own strategy to get their staff in?
Yeah. And that's a very fair point. And I concede that that's a very fair point. So given we now have this ridiculous situation of what is said to be a state-of-the-art facility sitting there empty because we can't get any staff, what more can you actually do now? What can be done to fix this problem straight away? Because I can imagine you can't just take people off the street and make them prison wardens, particularly with young people. They do need training.
Oh, they do. And as I had the experience of a prison officer for a short period of time, a couple of years back in the 90s. You do need training to get in there, and more so with young people because it's a different cohort you work with. But we've got Parkville and we've got Malmesbury. Why? And again, why aren't we looking at ways that we can move some of the young people across and maybe some of the staff? Because you've got the better and more improved facilities at Cherry Creek. There's a mental health section in there. There's an alcohol and drug section. And currently we're spending, and I said it's $5,000 a day per young person in our system. So it's double New South Wales, 2.5 times Queensland. It's more than any AFL player is paid. And for the same money, I could send 40 kids to a private school in Melbourne. So why is all of that money being thrown in there and the results aren't showing and highlighting for it? It's because the government strategy plan is do what we can to keep it quiet rather than take some risks, look around the world, see who's doing it better, and have the focus. Be courageous. Our focus is to not have children in jail. That's our focus.
Brad,
if we can intervene early, we can.
Just on that, I know you said you'd prefer not to have anybody under the age of 18 in prison because it means they're not committing crimes. One of the issues I think that will be debated right through this year is raising the age of criminal responsibility. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So my goal still would be to have no child, like I said, under the age of 18 in jail. But I think it comes back to that reform of what we need to look at. And that needs to be how do we reform the system so violent offenders, because I've always said violent offenders need to have a place to go in detention.
Yeah, but specifically on the age of criminal responsibility, where would you set it? Where would you like to see it?
No, but it all comes into that though, Heidi, because if you try and put anyone under 14, we would have always said we would never adjust it for children who are violent offenders. So under 14, if you're a violent offender, you still have to have criminal responsibility. But we also acknowledge that we need to start to reform the system for children under 14. How do we work with them to improve their opportunities, whether it's through other diversion means, early intervention, finding the risk factors. In Cheshire in the UK, they identify a young person, they'll put £150,000 into that one person, but it helps the whole community. And they prevent more people going to jail. We don't do that because we're spending $5,000 a day on keeping some kids in.
Yeah.
So if we can get the kids that aren't scary out, and I'm going to say the kids we aren't afraid of, back out into the system and in programs, we can use that savings to invest early and stop them going in.
Good discussion. Thanks, Brad, for joining us this morning.
No worries. Thank you very much to you all.